So thank you all for being here tonight. Welcome to our film screening of Other Side of the Hill. My name is Lindsay Hardy. I use she and her pronouns, and I am the program director of the Energy and Waste programs at the Environmental Center in Central Oregon. I'm joined here this evening by Bridget Callahan from Sustainable Northwest, who is helping us with some of the programming that you're about to hear about from Grace Andrews. And then we have a few panelists here from Lake County Resources Initiative, Jim Walls and Nick Johnson, who are going to be available for questions after the film. And you'll see that they are stars of the film and featured in the film. And so I just wanted to take a minute to introduce Commissioner Phil Chang, who's going to kick off this event for us this evening. Phil was elected to the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners in 2020, and he's lived here in Central Oregon since 2004. And he was looking for a great place to raise a family and continue his career in natural resource management and enjoy the great outdoors. And so he has worked in natural resource management and represented our community to Washington, D.C. as a congressional staffer and is now serving us here in our community on the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners. So I'm going to pass it over to Phil to kick off the event, and then we'll learn more about this project and why we are screening this film here tonight in Deschutes County from Grace. So thank you all for being here. Phil, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Lindsay, and welcome everyone. It's my honor to introduce this film tonight, or to help introduce this film tonight, and to get to talk energy with people after the screening. First, I'd like to start by thanking some of the people who made this event possible. Thanks to the Environmental Center and Sustainable Northwest for bringing us the experiences of these three other Oregon communities. With both the impacts of climate change and the opportunities for economic revitalization that come with fighting climate change. Thanks also to the Environmental Center and Sustainable Northwest for leading the charge in exploring clean energy opportunities for our community this coming year through the energy analysis that you're going to hear a little bit more about from Grace in a moment. And thank you all for taking time to join us this evening. Your participation is what makes events like this impactful. And I know that people have lots of things to do. So you taking the time to join us here tonight is really important and is going to make it a good evening. So Lake, Sherman, and Wallowa counties are experiencing the impacts of climate change just like we are. They are seeing increasingly frequent and severe droughts. They're seeing increasingly frequent and severe wildfires, diminishing snowpack, dangerous heat waves, and more. These communities are also finding opportunities for community revitalization and economic development by mitigating climate change and making their home landscapes more resilient to climate change. So there's a lot to learn from these communities. We in Deschutes County and Central Oregon can take an active role in mitigating and adapting to climate change as well. And our community and economy can benefit from those efforts. We have some unique opportunities here because, for example, Deschutes is a rural county with a few urban chunks in it. Like, you know, Ben and Jerry's ice cream. It's mostly rural, but it's got some good chunks in it. You know, we have these unique opportunities. For example, we have a whole lot of roof space in Deschutes County to put solar panels on. So when we're talking about solar energy, we have the option to use space and land more efficiently and put solar panels on a lot of roofs versus ground-mounted installations, because open space and land is a lot more scarce here than it is in other parts of the state. But there's so much to learn from the experiences of Lake, Sherman, and Wallowa counties. So I especially want to thank sustainability leaders Jim Walls and Nick Johnson, who you'll hear from a lot tonight in the film, for joining us also for the discussion. Looking forward to learning about your experiences, Nick and Jim. Thanks. And on to Grace.
All right. So Is there some echoing going on? Are we good? Okay. All right, thanks everyone for being here tonight. I am going to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself and what I'm doing at the Environmental Center and at Sustainable Northwest. So, there we go. And I will start this here. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the energy conversation that we're hoping to start in Deschutes County. My name is Grace Andrews. I am the Energy Program Coordinator at the Environmental Center. I use she, her pronouns. And here's a little more about me. I'm working with the Environmental Center and Sustainable Northwest as an AmeriCorps RARE member. So that is Resource Assistance for Rural Environments. It's an AmeriCorps program that's run out of the University of Oregon and sends about 30 people every year across the state of Oregon to rural communities in order to help them expand their capacity for community-related projects. And I'm really happy to be spending my service year here in Bend. And my projects broadly are working towards a sustainable energy future for Deschutes County. A little bit more about that. Some of the things that I'm doing, researching what kinds of energy Deschutes County uses and in what ways, how much renewable energy are we producing, how much energy are we using, how much could we be saving, that kind of thing. And I'm also learning about how other communities across Oregon have planned for their energy future. Sustainable Northwest has been great in that and connecting me to other communities that have done similar sort of energy planning processes and try to find out what's the best way to tackle this from an Oregon perspective. And we're also trying to recognize energy problems and potential local solutions, such as, like Commissioner Chang was saying, there's a lot of potential for rooftop solar here. So how can that be a solution to our energy issues? And then most of all, we want to listen to community members about their wants, needs, and concerns relating to energy. So that's everybody here tonight and more. These are just some little facts about Deschutes County relating to energy that I thought would interest you guys. About 27% of households in Deschutes County are energy burdened, which means they spend 6% or more of their income on energy. Pacific Power is our electric utility around here, our biggest electric utility, and they get about 70% of their energy from fossil fuels. On the brighter side, about 870 renewable energy projects in Deschutes County have taken advantage of Energy Trust of Oregon incentives. So those are the projects that the Energy Trust of Oregon has on their books. And like we were saying, there's enormous potential for something like solar energy, especially because we live in a really sunny place. And sort of what's coming up, what's next? We want to have constructive community-led discussions about how to improve energy use, improve local energy production, and improve energy resilience in Deschutes County. So the goal for today's film screening is to sort of start that conversation about homegrown renewable energy projects and what more of those might look like here in Central Oregon in Deschutes County. And if you would like to be kept in the loop about this discussion, if you have something that you want to say, if you have some ideas about how we can connect with the community, please contact me. My email is right there, grace@envirocenter.org. And I would love to talk to you about this. All right, so that's me. And please continue putting your names and locations in the chat. I think it's really fun to see that. But right now, we are going to start the film that you guys came here to watch. Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed the film. It's always great to see that again. So I'm going to get us started with our panelists here. I think I'll start with a question for Jim and or Nick. What have been your biggest challenges in making projects involving renewables, making them happen, and what kind of challenges have you run into over the years as you've been doing this?
I can't say there was that much challenge, because the challenge was in the forest collaborative. And what got us to renewables is we were thinking, well, we're not going to be harvesting these big old pines anymore. We're going to be thinning for fire reduction. And so we started thinking, what could we do? We could build a biomass plant. So we started working on that. We had a lot of geothermal. So it was like a natural progression in my mind, and in the commissioner's mind and the mayor's minds in Paisley and Lakeview, I think. I don't think it was that big. And plus we had 5 mills out of 6 that closed to say, look, we can do some economic development through renewables. So I really don't think it was that big of a challenge. Maybe I'm a little over daydreaming it here or something, but that's the way I'd look at it. I really didn't think it was that huge. It was just something natural.
Yeah, and I kind of have to agree with you, Jim, from my perspective as well. You know, at whatever scale we're talking about, utility scale projects or like rooftop scale projects or other smaller scale projects, there's benefits to be had from renewable energy that fit the needs of, you know, just about everybody we've worked with. It's never been a no-win situation. Usually it's a win-win situation.
That's so great to hear. And that's such a good point that you have to focus on the benefits and it all kind of just falls into place like that. That's great. Another question. Oh, here's a good one from the audience. Are you getting questions from other rural communities? Have other rural communities contacted you about how to replicate your model? And what would you say are the key conditions to getting started in that kind of a model?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting interest from other rural communities, particularly in Eastern Oregon all the time. You know, this is an example of bringing us together with another community who's interested in learning more about what we did. Yeah, Jim, do you have any perspective or thoughts on that question?
Well, I also think, and correct me, you know my memory, Nick, so Ohio, we did a presentation there like this, and we had a lot of interest. And then we did Republican N, a group, and the director was a former congressman out of, I think, South Carolina or North Carolina, one of those states. And so there was interest there too. So it is spreading. And it's really the movie of Other Side of the Hill between Western Oregon and Eastern Oregon. Those differences were real, are real still today. But we made a lot of connections in that regard too. After this.
To answer the second part of that question on maybe how to get started, you know, it really, what drove all this in Lake County was need. There was a need for us to move towards a more renewable based economy. So I think in different communities, it's identifying what that need is and being adaptive and finding ways to meet that need in a sustainable and economic fulfilling way.
And that's true. And I know that was also true in Wallowa County. I can't speak for Sherman, but I know Nels real well and the stuff they went through. We modeled a lot after that, thanks to Sustainable Northwest and stuff. So yeah, I think and Sustainable Northwest has seen a lot of that same movement in different counties they've worked in.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm personally in my work also looking to sort of collect that kind of knowledge and create it into sort of a toolkit that other people could see and learn from. So that's something that I'm personally really interested in as well. Another question that I have over here Maybe this one is a little bit more for Commissioner Chang. What do you see as the future for solar in Deschutes County?
I was looking at the Q&A, and it also said that Mike Riley should answer the question, but so maybe I could give a couple of thoughts. But I do, you know, I definitely want Mike, who has thought about this quite a bit, to answer as well. I do. When I was giving those introductory comments, and I said, you know, we have a lot of rooftops in Deschutes County. We have 200,000 people here. We have a lot of big box stores and large municipal and public buildings. And there's a whole lot of roof that doesn't have any solar panels on it. And so I do think that is a really important opportunity. Yeah, the big box and the big public buildings in particular, because you with solar you get economies of scale. So, you know, putting a couple panels on someone's house is good. Putting a whole bunch of panels on top of a Home Depot, the amount of energy you get, you know, the amount the what you pay for each increment of energy you get is much less. You get economies of scale. And we could also see, you know, there's a real attraction to doing like large, you know, open field ground mounted installations. And we have a couple of those in Deschutes County. But Deschutes County is also, it is filling up with people really fast. We don't have as much open space, you know, open private land that's not, you know, good farmland or important forest land as some other counties might. So I'm not completely against open, you know, ground mounted open field systems, but I really do hope that we can fill up a lot of those rooftops first, so that we can, you know, just use our land as efficiently as possible.
And that's a great point Commissioner Chang brings up. You know, when Lake County was working on attracting renewable energy developments in the early days, you know, we have a ton of land that's really not usable for anything else. But over time, that land has been consumed by projects. And today, you know, there's still a massive interest from developers and companies looking at building these ground-mounted systems. But now we're seeing a lot more issues around land use and the impacts to neighbors and impacts to communities through that. And you know, I completely support what he's saying there around utilizing rooftop space for projects. You avoid all of those land use conflicts and resource conflicts. So I just wanted to chime in and note that as well. So thank you, Commissioner.
Definitely, yeah. And here's a follow-up question from the chat. How can the county incentivize those big box stores and other big roofs to install solar?
One of the things that I've been tracking is that a new program that was created by the state legislature this past year, or just a few months ago when the session closed, called the Community Renewable Energy Program. And the legislature put $50 million into a grant program that will run about 4 years. And that program is, it'll make grants up to, say, like $1 million for community renewable energy projects. And in particular, they're really interested in resiliency projects. So, you know, a county could partner with, some other entity that owns, you know, a large roof on a project that helped us, make sure that there was backup power in case of a major power outage for, you know, our 911 call center, or for our fairgrounds, where there's, you know, we might stage emergency events, or, you know, if there's huge evacuations from somewhere, you know, a lot of those people will end up at the fairgrounds, kind of camped out for whatever period of time. So there's that program that represents some opportunities. There's the County Board of Commissioners has been approached by Deschutes 350 with a proposal to enable a program called Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy, or CPACE, C-P-A-C-E. And essentially what this would do is give commercial property owners access to additional streams of financing to do clean energy projects. And the connection to the county is that essentially if you don't make your payments on your financing, the lender can get at you through your tax assessment on your property. And so that's where the county role is. You know, we are the tax collectors for all of the taxing districts within our community. And so we would have to, agree to play this sort of, intermediary role in ensuring that payments, that financing payments are made. And we are literally right now deliberating on whether to enable a CPACE program in Deschutes County or not. So that's financing is a big part of what makes these projects, makes or breaks projects. And so if you have input for the County Board of Commissioners on that, I hope you'll go ahead and write in, and I'll type into the email address that you should send public comments to in the chat.
Great, thank you so much. That sounds like a really interesting program. And Mike, if you did want to chime in on the solar, you could put something in chat, or I can try to let you talk. I'm not really sure how that works. But moving on for now. Okay, so this one says, as the movie pointed out, there seems to be so much polarization around how people view climate change, its causes and its solutions, especially along urban and rural lines. What do you think are the most important first things that need to happen to start breaking down that polarization and getting people talking and working together that don't normally talk to each other? So that could be for anyone if they want to answer.
I don't want to volunteer Jim for this one, but what I've been thinking about more and more often is that the way the Forest Collaborative and that work was approached, there's a lot of lessons learned from that can be applied to this topic as well. And just, honestly, like conversations like this, having folks come together and talk about this stuff and express their concerns and talk about it in a respectful and open way, and come into those conversations with an open mind. It takes a long time to build trust between those urban and rural boundaries, or I guess groups. But it's something that's really important, and creating space for folks to just have open and honest conversations about where they're coming from, I think, is a really important step in that. But again, Jim was there at the beginning of the forming of the Lakeview Stewardship Group Forest Collaborative, and I'm sure has some great insights about some of the hurdles that they went through at the beginning as far as developing that trust and hashing out some of those initial, I guess, misconceptions or misunderstandings.
I'll just add to that. Nick hit it right on the head. And good facilitation with groups of disagreement is that you respect each other's opinion and you listen. Doesn't mean you have to agree with the other person's opinion, but you listen and then you talk about the things and you try to come to a common understanding of where you might both agree on certain things. And it's good facilitation that makes that work. And the agreement of the parties to participate good in that manner. And we had to have some discussions. I won't mention names, but there was one environmentalist I had to have a long discussion with about how we work those type of things, because they were advocates for their point of view, and that's understandable.
Yeah, thank you. Phil, did you want to chime in?
I wanted to follow on the question and kind of give Jim and Nick a chance to say a little more in a particular way. So when we talk about climate change in Salem or in Washington, D.C., or on social media, we see it get very, very polarized very fast. And the conversations can get really simplistic and divisive. And at the local level, there's a magic that happens when people discuss issues. And so I would love to have you guys talk a little bit about, what is going on when you have those kind of face-to-face conversations, or you put together field trips or things like that at the local level that allows us to avoid that kind of simplistic, polarized, divisive, conflict that we see, at the legislature or in Congress or in Washington, D.C. or on social media and other places.
Well, Phil,
Yeah,
you hit it on the head. It even gets down to at the local level, you start the discussions and outsiders are coming in, in the collaborative, it's Wilderness Society, Nature Conservancy, Defenders of Wildlife, Oregon Wild, etc. But you start we'd have barbecues out here at my place. And I think half of the collaboration, getting to know each other, knowing your families, talking to each other, is having those non-discussion on the issue, but just getting to know each other was part of it. And the field tours did that too. You're all on the same bus, so you get to talking with each other. It's a process, and sometimes with the fast media and the internet and all that we got, that doesn't happen. And that's why I think we're seeing more, confrontation type things and more fast opinions than if you go about it. It is a slower process to do what I just described. And it takes time.
And to kind of build off of that too, we try to approach the conversation around renewable energy and sustainability apolitically. We try to take politics out of that conversation, whether or not like folks want to recognize that like climate change is human caused, or, maybe they think that it's not. That's really not the issue, or I guess how we're approaching this topic. Folks recognize that the climate is changing. And, I guess almost that whole conversation in itself is a separate vein. But when we talk about the adoption of renewable energy, there's benefits for whatever they have going. There's benefits for agricultural producers because it saves them energy. It reduces their overhead. There's benefits for rural business owners, again, because it lowers their overhead and supports them and enables them to do or build a healthier business in rural communities. So I guess another big part of it is knowing your audience, knowing who you're speaking to, and making sure that you're speaking to them in the same language, or you're speaking to them on the same page as they are, and really like talking about those benefits that they care about. Locally, we talk about the economics of renewable energy because the economics are there. It is an economic driver and it supports business, but if we're having a conversation with perhaps like a more left-leaning group, we may talk more about the environmental and ecological benefits of renewable energy and the carbon emissions that are avoided from the adoption of renewable energy projects. So I think it's really about knowing your audience and tailoring the conversation to your audience as well.
Thank you so much for that insight. That's such a good way to think about it, I think. So thank you. Okay, next question. This is a question from someone who saw a documentary, Saved by the Sun, a few years ago that had solar panels that were high enough that sheep could graze under them. And they're wondering about solar arrays being so close to the ground versus high up. And I think a good question to sort of go along with that from my brain is, what are the ways maybe that solar panels can coexist with that kind of agricultural income like that?
So first, I want to circle back to what we talked about earlier, is just the roof space that's available to host projects where you avoid the land use conversation altogether. But when it comes to like these dual use projects, there's definitely some potential And I think that we're not really seeing that catch on in Eastern Oregon for a couple of different reasons. These large utility scale projects that we have in Eastern Oregon, it's electrical code that they have to be fenced off. So it's not like feasible to have like sheep or cattle like grazing underneath them just from a code standpoint. So I guess that's a massive barrier to it as well. But the other one is the type of agriculture that we primarily see in Eastern Oregon. You got a lot of folks growing alfalfa. Up along the gorge, you got dryland wheat, and it takes big equipment to harvest and harvest those crops. So if you're driving a full size swather, you need 30 feet or something to get that between rows of solar panels. So I think it's a few different issues why we haven't seen that catch on, but I certainly think it's something that should continue to be explored, and does have some awesome applications for maybe more ground cover crops.
And we did in Lake County with the county commissioners, work with them, and we don't put any on irrigated cropland. We primarily try and concentrate on alkaline sagebrush ground that has not much grazing value, if any. So we're trying to use the worst ground. And now that we've done a whole bunch of them, I think we've got a committee that's even looking for further restrictions so that we don't impact other industries and stuff. And I think that's good,
Yeah, and again, we talk about this land use conversation, and it's becoming more and more of an issue and more of a topic. And will continue to be so with the passing of House Bill 2021. We're going to see more interest in Eastern Oregon and some of these counties where solar is a great option. But from our perspective, it's really important to take community values into account. And the community spoke pretty clearly here and said that they don't want to see projects built on irrigated ag land, because there's a lot of different reasons why that is the case. And we oppose the development of irrigated ag land for solar development in Lake County, especially because, like Jim said, we have so much of this alkaline sage ground that really isn't good for anything else. It's not good for grazing. It's not good for crop production. It doesn't host wildlife. It's just land that's out there not being used. But our favorite place to see these large ground mounted systems built is on Brownsfield project areas, or old mill sites that can be remediated. You're again, just really avoiding that conflict and maintaining those community values.
Definitely. Yeah. I feel like each community is so different in terms of what they need from a renewable energy project like that, even the scale and the different industries that exist in that community, that it can't really, there's no way to have something that works for every community. So that's really important to consider. Somebody else asked about, did county officials initiate the project? I'm not sure exactly which project they're referring to, but maybe we could talk about the role of counties in encouraging these projects or even initiating them.
I think the question was about Lake County and the role in LCRI and the Forest Collaborative and the renewable energy initiatives there.
Yeah, Jim, maybe if you want to provide some insight to the early days, and I can kind of talk about where we are now in that context.
Okay, yeah. When we were working with Collaborative and looking at biomass geothermal as the first moves in renewable, and a small solar project on a former radar site that the military had out in the desert. We hadn't thought of large scale solar yet, but we've developed a program, educational promotional program, and we labeled Lake County Oregon's most renewable energy county. And the state highway even put up signs of all our entrances going into the county. And we had a big promotion, and that started bringing developers. And because we had good line access and line capacity, these developers started looking more and more. It's actually the developers that started initiating the projects, really. It was our promotion that helped. But, and then when they call the state of Oregon Department of Energy, they go, well, Lake County is Oregon's most renewable energy county. You ought to talk to those guys. It's that type of thing that I think made it work. Yeah, including our congressional staff too, knew about us too, stuff like that.
Yeah. And today we still work really closely with the county, and we maintain open communication lines and channels with the county. You know, and I keep talking about this, but siting and land use issues is, again, something that's very important. And the county actually formed what was called a solar siting committee. We've had a couple of meetings. It's kind of not been super active for the last couple of months, but the purpose of that was to identify what the community's values were, and ensure that the county was standing up for those and representing those community values and expressing those and communicating those to developers. So the county plays a pretty, you know, a very critical role, I guess, if you will, in this whole process. And groups like LCRI, we're just there to support, and we're there to help bridge those communication channels, and kind of act as an intermediary in some senses. And we also help with project development stuff too, as needed, which is kind of a whole nother discussion. We can dive into that later if there's time.
Yeah, thanks for that. I feel like that's a really important connection to make between the developers and the community, and that's a great place for the county to come in, or some other form of government, because I think a lot of people I think some developers don't necessarily always have the community's best interests at heart, or at least they have no idea what the community's best interests are, or like what the community cares about. So that's definitely a step that needs to be made in that kind of communication process.
We've seen that, Grace, we've seen that really big, and that if they're not community members, and sometimes large corporations don't always know how to be a community member, but a lot of the developers have. But one that's had some difficulties here lately came in without that concept of community and wasn't real well received. And so the commissioners help play that role too, locally, and bridging that community and stuff. We've had developers build 4-H farms and stuff for kids in town, so they could have a 4-H animal and do that kind of stuff. And school development, we got curriculum from the solar farms going into schools in curriculum so that they can use the data. So it's being a good community member that they need to learn. If they haven't already, they need to learn that, because that's important.
That's fantastic. I was also really impressed by the developer that was featured in the film as having like 80% local employment. That's huge. Yeah, Commissioner Chang.
I wanted to mention one other thing that I think is fairly common when county governments or city governments are talking with renewable energy developers about large scale projects, which is tax abatement. There's, I mean, you heard Judge Gary Thompson from Sherman County talk about the deal that he worked with the wind developers. I mean, they large energy developers are interested in coming in and making big capital investments, and getting a tax break if they can, to build their project and have it operate in a county for a certain number of years. And if there's a delicate balance there. I mean, a county that wants to have jobs, wants to contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, those are good reasons to think about giving a tax abatement. But depending on kind of what that takes from the county, a lot of land, or siting in a sensitive spot, it's important to think about the trade-offs of that as well. And when Jim mentioned how some of these entities will contribute to schools or new community facilities, I think that's a good thing that a local government can get from a big energy developer, in exchange for some tax abatement as well.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you for that perspective. Okay, here's one that I wanted to ask about. So we saw the story of Sherman County in the film, went from one of the poorest counties in Oregon to one of the richest per capita. So Jim and Nick, in your experience, how do renewable energy projects that you've experienced impact community health and prosperity kind of overall? That those initiatives that you were just talking about, Jim, with like the schools and the playgrounds and stuff, I feel like that's, can you expand some more on that? And then Phil, when you get a chance, what changes would you like to see around here in Deschutes County that renewable energy could help implement? Or how could renewable energy help make those changes that you want to see? So Jim, would you maybe want to start with some of the benefits that you've seen?
Well, as mentioned earlier in the film, I think it was, the normal tax, and they can negotiate with the commissioners on this, but is $7,000 per megawatt. And I think now we're up over $1 million in new taxes in the county. And then one of the bigger developers put a lot into some of the schools, not only the curriculum, but some other things. And then the 4-H farm. So there's, you know, those kind of benefits that I think are to the community that are really critical.
Nick,
Did I lose?
Yeah, sorry.
No.
Yeah, Jim kind of hit the nail on the head with those two things there. But another part that I always like to talk about is that like local employment is a big deal. And a lot of times you hear the argument that these jobs for solar developments are just temporary, and maybe that is the case, but you have a higher trained and more skilled workforce. And we're moving into a time when we're going to see continued renewable energy development on a broader scale, you know, both in our state and probably on a national level as well. So having that experience in your workforce and the ability to move into those positions as they come up, or even move on with those companies and stay with them for long durations, is extremely important. So you're saying, you know, in some senses, the downstream impacts to a higher quality of life for folks that are associated with building and getting involved with these projects.
And one of the developers that's done a lot here in Lake County, it was talked about the community solar bill that was passed, and the county leased LCRI for $1 a year, some acreage to put on a 1.5 megawatts or 2 megawatt system for community. And I had a local developer said, we'll finance that. That's going to be over $1.5 million. We'll finance it if the school and the hospital can't. You know, we're willing to step up and do that. They'll get paid back a return on investment, a low return, but they're willing to do that. So those are the other kind of benefits you can get too.
Definitely.
I guess it all starts with relationships. It's all about relationship building in whatever aspect you're talking about this with developers, with community, with county commissioners, with, you know, trust and relationship building. It's just the foundation for a lot of this stuff.
Absolutely. And I think the community solar program is great for that.
So on my end, I wanted to connect back to that phrase, the stewardship economy, that came up when we were watching Wallowa County's story. There are actually some really neat opportunities for renewable energy development to connect with ecosystem stewardship. You know, restoration of rivers and restoration of our forests here in Deschutes County. I'm sorry, I'm not home in Deschutes County right now, but at home in Deschutes County. And the two examples I would give are, number one, there is a whole bunch of canal piping work, irrigation canal piping work going on in the Deschutes Basin, so that we can stretch our limited water resources farther, put more water back in the rivers, and increase water supply reliability for, you know, some of the most productive farmers in the basin in Jefferson County through irrigation modernization. And when they take those leaky irrigation canals, because our geology is super porous in the Deschutes Basin, when they put those leaky irrigation canals into pipes, it creates opportunities to put turbines in the pipes and generate, you know, micro hydro. And we have like a handful of megawatts of in conduit hydro in Deschutes Basin right now. And that helps to actually pay for the piping project. So we are helping to restore flow to the river by developing hydro within those conduits. The other example that you kind of got a sense of from both the Lake County story and the Wallowa County story is there's a lot of forest restoration that needs to be done. And we generate a whole lot of biomass material, waste product from basically trying to take dry forest ecosystems that have been highly altered by removing all the big trees and by taking fire out of the system for hundreds of years or over 100 years. We're trying to restore, in those dry pine forests, large trees, widely spaced with a grassy understory. And you need to cut down a lot of little trees to do that. And we have opportunities to take that biomass material and use it for heating fuel instead of burning natural gas or other petroleum type products like propane, which we use a lot of. We still have communities like Sisters that they don't have natural gas in Sisters, and so they're burning propane or heating oil or things like that for thermal energy generation. And instead of importing fossil fuel, digging up fossil fuel, taking fossil fuels out of the ground, importing them, into our country, into our state, and using those as a heating fuel, we could be taking that biomass that we're going to burn in the forest anyway, and burning it in high efficiency boilers and replacing, offsetting that fossil fuel use. And instead of burning the heating oil and burning the biomass out in the forest, you just burn the biomass. And in so doing, you can accomplish some net carbon emission reductions, even though you're still doing combustion. I know in renewable energy circles, combustion is a bad word, but in this case, combustion is going to happen, whether it be through wildfire or burning biomass in piles in the forest or offsetting fossil fuel use. So there's a couple examples of how renewable energy development can actually help us with the stewardship economy.
Definitely, yeah, that concept of a stewardship economy is so promising and so important. All right, so as a closing question, and people can feel free to answer this in the chat as well for themselves. So this is for everyone. In the film, Kendall Martell says that instead of coming to the table with a steadfast position, we should ask ourselves and each other about what we want to see in the future. So what does a beautiful, wonderful future, like she talks about in the film, what does that look like to you?
I can take a stab at that, and I'll keep it pretty brief. But this is what I really believe: it's healthy landscapes, healthy communities, and healthy economies driven by stewardship.
That's great.
Very well said. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, and I would flesh that out a little bit by just saying a healthy landscape is resilient. It's resilient to climate change. With some of the things I just mentioned, rivers with more flow in them, forests that are restored to a more prehistoric, structure and process. That's a healthy landscape that's also resilient to, climate change. And, all of those things help us contribute to combating climate change.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. Lindsay or Bridget, do you have anything you want to add, or?
Yeah, I really think all of the above, and then adding on healthy homes where everybody can afford to pay their utility bills and be comfortable in their own home, to actually have homes be shelters and places that keep us safe.
Yeah, I think really bringing everybody to the same table and being able to talk about these things together is a really key part of that as well.
Yeah, I did everything. And I just, I think want to echo that, we have more than any other time in our recent history, the ability to democratize our energy resources. And as folks have more say and control and access over where our energy is coming from, I'd like to see that go into overdrive in the next 10 to 15 years.
That's so great. It was great to hear from everybody tonight. And I hope you all enjoyed the film and our little discussion. If anybody wants to talk about renewable energy in Deschutes County a little bit more, has ideas or knows someone who has ideas, please contact me. I'll put my email in the chat. And yeah, this recording will be available, at least the discussion will be available on YouTube. Hopefully we'll get a link to the film that some of the people who weren't able to be here tonight can watch it maybe tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And I hope you all have a great night.